What if a single moment of courage could unleash a revolution of love capable of changing the world? Follow the extraordinary journey of David and Jennifer, who turned an incident of prejudice in their marriage into a global movement of acceptance. Discover how their love not only overcame barriers but also inspired thousands, culminating in a Nobel Peace Prize. Stay with me until the end. Hello. Welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss any stories. The June sun shone softly on the lush garden of Fairview Manor, a picturesque spot on the outskirts of Boston, Massachusetts. The flowers perfumed the air with a sweet fragrance, while the birds sang a joyful melody, as if they were celebrating the love that was about to be sealed. David Anderson stood at the makeshift altar, his heart beating hard against the chest of his rented tuxedo. His brown eyes wandered anxiously down the aisle of white chairs decorated with lavender satin ribbons. He could hardly believe that this day had finally arrived. "Take a deep breath, man," whispered his best friend and best man, Alex, giving him a reassuring pat on the shoulder. "She'll be here any minute." As if responding to Alex's words, the first notes of Pachelbel's Canon in D began to play softly. The guests stood up, turning towards the beginning of the hall, and there she was. Jennifer Reyes appeared as a vision in white, her dress flowing gracefully as she walked down the aisle. David felt the air leave his lungs. She looked stunning, her radiant smile lighting up the whole garden. As Jennifer approached, David noticed the glint of tears in her dark eyes. He knew that look. It was a mixture of pure joy and fierce determination. It was the same look that had captivated him when they met at law school, both determined to make a difference in the world. Jennifer arrived at the altar, handing her bouquet of white lilies to her maid of honor, Maya. The two friends exchanged a meaningful glance, years of friendship and mutual support reflected in that brief moment. "You look absolutely beautiful," David whispered, taking Jennifer's hands in his. "And you don't look bad at all, Mr. Anderson," she replied with a mischievous smile. The celebrant, a retired judge and mentor to both of them, sniffled softly. "Dear friends and family," he began, his voice resonating through the garden, "we are gathered here today to celebrate the union of David and Jennifer." As the celebrant spoke about love and commitment, David and Jennifer could hardly take their eyes off each other. Their smiles were as bright as the sun above, reflecting the joy they felt at finally getting married after years of dating and planning. Among the guests, smiling faces and watery eyes could be seen. David's mother, Elena, discreetly dried a tear, while Jennifer's father, Robert, looked on with obvious pride. Friends from college, work colleagues, and family members from both sides filled the rows, all united to witness this special moment. The celebrant continued. "The love that David and Jennifer share is a testimony to the strength of the human heart. They show us that true love knows no limits, that it transcends differences and unites people of all kinds." At that moment, Jennifer squeezed David's hands lightly, a silent gesture that spoke volumes. They had faced challenges along the way, subtle prejudices, disapproving looks, insensitive comments, but their love had prevailed, stronger than any adversity. "Before we proceed with the vows," said the celebrant, "I would like to invite anyone who has reasons why this couple should not be united in marriage to speak now or forever hold their peace." A respectful silence fell over the assembly. David and Jennifer exchanged confident glances, certain that nothing could shake their happiness on this perfect day. But then a voice cut through the air like a sharp knife. "I have something to say." All eyes turned to the bottom of the garden, where an older man with gray hair and a frown rose from his chair. It was David's Uncle Richard, known for his controversial opinions and sharp tongue. Jennifer's smile faltered for a moment, but she stood her ground. David felt a wave of protection rise up inside him. The perfect day they had planned for so long suddenly seemed to be teetering on the edge of a precipice. The celebrant, taken by surprise, stammered, Yes. Do you have anything to say?" Richard Anderson stepped forward, his gaze fixed on the couple at the altar. The tension in the air was palpable, and everyone present held their breath, waiting for what would come next. The silence that followed Richard Anderson's interruption was so thick that it seemed suffocating. David felt Jennifer squeeze his hand tighter, and he returned the gesture, trying to convey strength and support through that simple touch. Richard snorted, his hard gaze sweeping across the guests before settling on the couple at the altar. "I can't keep quiet about this," he began, his voice laden with disapproval. "David, my nephew, do you really think this is what's best for our family?" A murmur of discomfort ran through the assembly. David felt his face heat up, a mixture of shame and anger beginning to bubble in his chest. "Uncle Richard," David began, trying to remain calm, "this is neither the time nor the place for—" But Richard interrupted him, his voice rising in volume. "No, this is exactly the time. Look around you, David. Our family has a lineage, a tradition to uphold, and you're throwing it all away for— He made a dismissive gesture towards Jennifer, whose eyes now shone with a mixture of hurt and indignation. "For love," Jennifer added firmly, her voice surprisingly steady. "He's choosing love, Mr. Anderson." Richard let out a bitter laugh. "Love? And what do you know about our family traditions? About our heritage? Do you think you can just fit in here?" The garden, once a scene of joy and celebration, now seemed to have been engulfed by a dark cloud of tension. Some guests shifted uncomfortably in their chairs, while others stared in horror at the scene that was unfolding. Maya, Jennifer's best friend, stepped forward, as if to protect her fiancé, but Jennifer stopped her with a look. This was her moment, her battle. "Mr. Anderson," Jennifer began, her voice gaining strength with every word, "I understand that you are concerned about traditions and lineage, but the love that David and I share transcends these artificial barriers that society has created." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "Our differences don't weaken us. They strengthen us. They teach us empathy, understanding, and the beauty of diversity." David looked at Jennifer with admiration, his heart overflowing with love and pride. He knew she was strong, but seeing her confront prejudice with such grace and eloquence left him speechless. Richard, however, didn't look convinced. His face turned red with anger. "This is ridiculous. You're blinded by what you call love. But what about the children? Have you thought about that? They'll never truly fit in anywhere." These words seemed to be the last straw. A buzz of indignation spread among the guests. Elena, David's mother, stood up abruptly, tears of anger in her eyes. "Richard, that's enough," she exclaimed. "How dare you ruin my son's day with your hatred and ignorance?" The celebrant, who until then had seemed paralyzed by the situation, finally found his voice. "Sir, I must ask you to leave if you cannot respect this union." But before anyone could take any action, Jennifer let go of David's hands and stepped forward. Her face was serene, but her eyes burned with an intensity that made everyone fall silent. "Mr. Anderson," she said, her clear, firm voice echoing through the garden, "I understand your fear, the fear of the unknown, of the different. But let me ask you a question. Wouldn't you want your own children, your grandchildren, to grow up in a better world? A world where love is celebrated in all its forms?" She paused, letting her words sink in. "Because that's what David and I are trying to build. Not just for us, but for future generations, so that no one else has to hear words of hate on what should be the happiest day of their lives." The silence that followed was deafening. Richard looked as if he had been struck by lightning, his mouth open in shock. The guests looked from Jennifer to Richard and back to Jennifer, waiting to see what would happen next. David, moved by his fiancée's courage, stood beside her. "Uncle Richard," he said softly, "I love Jennifer, and nothing you say will change that. If you can't accept our union, perhaps it's best that you leave." The garden stood in suspense, all eyes on Richard Anderson. The older man seemed to be fighting an internal battle, his face a mixture of conflicting emotions. At that crucial moment, no one knew whether David and Jennifer's love would be strong enough to overcome ingrained prejudice, or whether this was just the beginning of a long journey of acceptance and understanding. The silence that followed Jennifer and David's words hung in the air like a dense fog. Richard Anderson remained motionless, his face a mask of conflicting emotions. For a moment, it seemed as if time had frozen in the garden of Fairview Manor, Then a soft but firm voice cut through the air. "Can I say something?" All eyes turned to Maya, Jennifer's best friend and maid of honor. She stepped forward, her lavender dress rustling softly. Her normally gentle eyes shone with fierce determination. "Mr. Anderson," Maya began, her voice gaining strength, "I grew up with Jennifer. We both faced prejudices and obstacles that you probably never had to consider." She paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. "When we were 15, we were prevented from entering a store because the owner didn't want our type in there. Jennifer not only defended me, but also educated that man about how wrong he was." A murmur of sympathy went through the crowd. Jennifer smiled at her friend, tears shining in her eyes. Maya continued. "Since then, Jennifer has been a light to everyone around her. She doesn't just overcome prejudice, she turns it into understanding. And that's why David loves her. That's why we all love her." Maya's words seemed to touch something in those present. Slowly, other guests began to stand up, sharing their own stories of overcoming and acceptance. One of David's work colleagues, a man called Michael, stood up. "I'm gay," he said, his voice shaky but determined. "When I came out in the office, Jennifer was the first to hug me and reassure me that I was accepted and valued." An elderly woman, Jennifer's great-aunt, stood up with the help of her cane. "I married a man outside our culture 50 years ago," she shared, her accent still strong. "We faced a lot of prejudice, but our love prevailed. And look at our family now, rich in diversity and love." One after another, people stood up, sharing stories of love that transcended barriers, of friendships that defied expectations, of moments of courage in the face of prejudice. David watched in amazement as the garden was transformed into a space of vulnerability and connection. He looked at Jennifer, whose face glowed with a mixture of emotion and pride. She had done it. Her courage had opened the floodgates to this wave of empathy and understanding. Richard Anderson, the unwitting instigator of this moment, seemed to diminish with each new story. His face, once red with anger, was now pale, his eyes wide with shock and perhaps a flash of shame. When the last story was shared, a reverent silence fell over the garden. Jennifer, still standing at the altar next to David, wiped a tear from her cheek and stepped forward. "Thank you," she said, her voice tinged with emotion. "Thank you all for sharing your stories, for being brave and vulnerable. That's what love does. It brings us together, makes us stronger, makes us better." She turned to Richard, who now looked smaller and older than ever. "Mr. Anderson, you came here today thinking you were protecting your family, your traditions, but look around you. This is your family. All these people, with their unique stories and their open hearts, this is the real tradition worth preserving." David, moved by his fiancée's strength and compassion, joined her. "Uncle Richard," he said softly, "we don't want to exclude you. We want you to be part of this family we're building, a family based on love, acceptance, and understanding." Richard looked around the garden, at the faces that stared at him not with anger, but with hope. His eyes filled with tears, and for the first time, his hard expression softened. He began, his voice breaking. "I don't know what to say. I'm sorry." Jennifer, in a surprising act of grace, came down from the altar and walked over to Richard. She held out her hand to him, a gesture of peace and reconciliation. "The important thing is that we're all here now," she said softly, "ready to learn, grow, and love together." Richard hesitated for a moment, looking at Jennifer's outstretched hand. Then he slowly took it, a sob escaping his lips. The garden erupted in spontaneous applause. Tears of joy and relief flowed freely. What had begun as a moment of conflict had turned into a powerful demonstration of love and acceptance. David joined Jennifer and Richard, enveloping them in a hug. "This," he said, looking around at the smiling, emotional faces, "is our family." The celebrant, visibly moved, sniffed. "Well," he said with a shaky smile, "I think we can get on with the ceremony, unless anyone else has something to say." A warm laugh rang through the garden. Love had prevailed, and the celebration could finally begin. The afternoon sun bathed the Fairview Manor garden in golden light, as if nature itself was blessing the moment of reconciliation that had just taken place. David and Jennifer returned to the altar, their hands entwined, their faces radiant with a mixture of love and triumph. The celebrant, regaining his composure, sniffled softly. "Well, dear friends and family," he began, a warm smile on his face. "I think we can agree that this was a rather unusual start to the ceremony." A wave of soft laughter ran through the assembly, easing the remaining tension. "But," the celebrant continued, "what we have just witnessed is a testimony to the power of love and understanding. David and Jennifer, you faced your first great challenge as a couple before you even exchanged vows, and you did it with grace, courage, and compassion." Jennifer smiled at David, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. He returned her gaze, feeling his heart overflow with love and admiration. "Now," said the celebrant, "before we proceed with the traditional vows, I'd like to propose something a little different. Given what we've just experienced, how about we incorporate elements of all the cultures represented here today into our ceremony?" A murmur of approval ran through the garden. Jennifer and David exchanged surprised but enthusiastic glances. "That would be wonderful," Jennifer replied, her face lighting up at the idea. David nodded in agreement. "Yes, let's celebrate all the diversity that makes us who we are." The celebrant smiled broadly. "Excellent. So, who would like to contribute a tradition from their culture to this union?" For a moment, there was silence. Then Jennifer's great-aunt, Doña Carmen, stood up, her voice heavy with the accent of her homeland. "In my culture," she said, "we have a tradition called El Lazo. It's a cord or ribbon that is placed around the bride and groom in the shape of an 8, symbolizing their eternal union." Jennifer smiled, tears in her eyes. "That would be beautiful, Aunt Carmen." Mrs. Carmen approached, carrying a delicately embroidered white silk ribbon. With Maya's help, she gently placed the ribbon over David and Jennifer, symbolically uniting them. Then a friend of David's from college, Raj, stood up. "In the Hindu tradition," he explained, "the bride and groom exchange garlands of flowers, symbolizing that they accept each other into their lives." With a smile, Raj handed 2 beautiful jasmine garlands to David and Jennifer, who exchanged them, the sweet scent of the flowers filling the air around them. David's mother, Elena, approached with a glass of wine. "In Jewish tradition," she said, her voice laced with emotion, "the bride and groom share a glass of wine, symbolizing the sweetness they desire in their life together." David and Jennifer drank from the goblet, their eyes fixed on each other, soft smiles on their lips. As more and more traditions were shared and incorporated into the ceremony, the garden was transformed into a vibrant celebration of cultures. There was a traditional African dance, blessings in different languages, and even Uncle Richard, in a surprising gesture of reconciliation, offered an ancient Irish blessing. The air was filled with music, laughter, and the scent of flowers and spices. It was as if the garden had become a microcosm of the world, all cultures blending together in beautiful harmony. Finally, it was time for the vows. David held Jennifer's hands, his eyes shining with love and emotion. "Jennifer, he began, his voice trembling slightly. "When I first met you, I thought I was in love. But today, watching you face prejudice with such grace and compassion, I realize that my love for you is even deeper than I imagined. You inspire me to be a better person every day. I promise to be by your side, facing whatever challenges life throws at us, celebrating our differences and the love that unites us." Jennifer smiled through her tears, squeezing David's hands. "David," she replied, her voice steady despite the emotion, "you are my safe haven, my partner, my best friend. Together, we prove today that love can overcome any barrier. I promise to love you not only on sunny days, but also in storms. I promise to build a family with you that celebrates diversity and spreads love and understanding around the world." There wasn't a dry eye in the garden when they finished their vows. The celebrant, visibly moved, spoke the final words. "By the power vested in me, and by the blessing of all the cultures and traditions represented here today, I pronounce you man and wife. You may seal this union with a kiss." David and Jennifer kissed, and the garden erupted in applause and cheers. The different cultural melodies blended into a symphony of celebration, marking the beginning not just of a marriage, but of a new era of understanding and acceptance. As the newlyweds walked back down the aisle, now covered in flower petals of different colors, it was clear to everyone present that they had witnessed something truly special. This wasn't just David and Jennifer's wedding. It was a celebration of love in its purest and most universal form. The sun was beginning to set over Fairview Manor, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange that seemed to reflect the warm atmosphere of the celebration. The ceremony had turned into a vibrant reception, with tables set up around the garden and twinkling lights hanging from the trees. David and Jennifer, still beaming with happiness, circulated among the guests, stopping to chat and thank everyone who had contributed to making their day so special. The air was filled with laughter, music, and the tantalizing aroma of a variety of dishes representing the different cultures present. "Attention, everyone!" The voice of Alex, David's best friend and best man, echoed through the garden. He was standing next to the makeshift dance floor, holding a microphone. "It's time for the bride and groom's first dance." A murmur of anticipation ran through the crowd as David and Jennifer made their way to the center of the dance floor. The music began to play, a soft melody that blended elements of jazz and bossa nova, a choice that reflected the fusion of their cultural heritages. David pulled Jennifer close, their bodies moving in perfect sync. "Are you happy?" he whispered in her ear. Jennifer looked up at him, her eyes shining. "More than I ever thought possible," she replied, leaning in for a gentle kiss. As they danced, the guests watched in respectful silence, many with tears in their eyes. It was as if the couple were in their own world, floating in a bubble of love and happiness. As the song came to an end, Maya approached the microphone. "Now," she announced with a mischievous grin, "how about we add a little flavor to this dance floor? Let's celebrate all the cultures that make this wedding so special." The music abruptly changed to a lively Latin rhythm, and Jennifer let out a laugh of surprise and joy. She immediately began to move to the salsa rhythm, pulling David along. "I can't dance to that," David protested, laughing. "Just follow my lead." Jennifer replied with a smile, guiding him through the steps. Soon, the dance floor was full. Mrs. Carmen and her husband joined the bride and groom, showing off dance moves that rivaled those of much younger dancers. Raj and some friends began a lively Bhangra dance, their energetic movements infecting everyone around them. The music kept changing, going through different styles and rhythms from all over the world. There was a Greek circle dance, where everyone joined hands, moving in an ever-widening circle. An African beat brought vibrant, lively movements to the dance floor. Even Uncle Richard, who had caused such a stir earlier, was persuaded to join in the celebration. He shyly ventured onto the dance floor during a country song, guided gently by Jennifer. "You're a very patient dancer," he commented, his cheeks flushed with embarrassment and effort. Jennifer smiled at him. "And you're doing very well for someone who said she'd never dance in public," she replied with a wink. As the evening progressed, the dance floor became a kaleidoscope of colors, movements, and smiles. It was as if the barriers between cultures had completely dissolved, leaving only the pure joy of celebration. In a moment of pause, David and Jennifer found themselves at the edge of the dance floor, watching their guests enjoying themselves. "Look at that," David said, amazed. "It's like we've created our own little world here." Jennifer nodded, resting her head on his shoulder. "A world where differences are celebrated, not feared," she added softly. At that moment, Maya approached, her face shining with sweat and happiness. "Hey, lovebirds," she said with a smile. "How about joining us for a group dance? We're trying to mix steps from all cultures into one dance." David and Jennifer exchanged amused glances before agreeing enthusiastically. They joined the circle of dancers, where Raj was trying to teach everyone a Bhangra move, while Doña Carmen demonstrated how to incorporate a salsa spin. The result was a chaotic but joyful mix of dance styles. There was laughter, stumbling and lots of hugging as everyone tried to keep up with the fusion of movements. As they danced, Jennifer looked around the garden. She saw smiling faces of all colors and ages. She saw people who, just a few hours ago, were strangers, now dancing and laughing together like old friends. She saw the love and acceptance that she and David had always dreamed of creating. "We did it," she whispered to herself, her heart overflowing with happiness. David, catching her words, pulled her close. "Yes, we did it," he agreed, kissing her softly. "And this is just the beginning." The evening continued, a vibrant celebration of love, diversity, and togetherness. It was more than a wedding. It was a testament to the power of love to unite people, transcend differences, and create something truly beautiful. And as the stars shone above, the garden at Fairview Manor continued to pulsate with music, laughter, and the promise of a future where love really does conquer all. The night wore on, but the energy of the celebration didn't wane. The twinkling lights in the trees created an almost magical atmosphere in the Fairview Manor garden. David and Jennifer, exhausted but exhilarated, decided to take a break from dancing and retreated to a quiet corner of the garden. Sitting on an ornate stone bench, they watched the scene before them. The dance floor was still packed, with people of all ages and backgrounds moving to the beat of the music. The tables were full of guests, chatting animatedly, swapping stories and making new connections. "Can you believe how this day has turned out?" Jennifer asked, leaning against David's shoulder. David let out a soft laugh. "Honestly, no, but I'm incredibly grateful for every moment." As they talked, they saw Maya approaching, carrying 3 glasses of champagne. She sat down next to them, handing over the drinks. "A toast to the newlyweds," Maya said, raising her glass, "and to the incredible journey you've embarked on today." They toasted, the clink of glasses mixing with the music and laughter in the background. "Maya," Jennifer began, her voice full of emotion, "I can't thank you enough for everything you've done today. Your courage in standing up and sharing your story, that meant a lot." Maya smiled, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "Jen, you've been my rock for so many years. It was the least I could do." The two friends hugged, years of friendship and mutual support reflected in that simple gesture. David watched, feeling blessed to have these 2 incredible women in his life. "You know," he said thoughtfully, "I think what happened today goes way beyond us. Look around." They followed David's gaze, observing the various groups that had formed. On the dance floor, Raj was teaching some Indian dance moves to an enthusiastic group of elderly people. Near the buffet, Uncle Richard was engaged in animated conversation with Robert, Jennifer's father, both gesticulating and laughing. It's as if we've created a microcosm of the world we want to see. Jennifer reflected. A place where differences are celebrated, not feared. Maya nodded thoughtfully. "You two have done something really special here. It's not just a wedding, it's a statement." Just then, Elena, David's mother, approached the group. Her face was radiant with happiness. "Darlings," she said, taking a seat next to them, "I just wanted to say how proud I am of you both. The way you've handled, well, everything today. It was truly inspiring." David hugged his mother, feeling a wave of gratitude. "Thanks, Mom. It means a lot coming from you." Elena smiled, then turned to Jennifer. "And you, my dear, you showed such grace and strength today. I'm honored to have you as my daughter-in-law." Jennifer felt tears welling up in her eyes. "Thank you, Elena. Your acceptance and love mean the world to me." As they talked, more guests began to approach. Each one brought a story, a thank you or a reflection on the day's events. Doña Carmen joined them, her eyes shining with wisdom. "You know," she said, her accent heavy with nostalgia, "this reminds me of the day I married my Antonio. We faced so much resistance, so much doubt, but love always finds a way." Raj, who had approached in time to hear Mrs. Carmen's comment, added, It's true. And what you've done today, turning a moment of conflict into a celebration of diversity, that's the true power of love. As the evening progressed, the small group grew. Guests of all ages and backgrounds came together, sharing stories, exchanging experiences, and creating connections that transcended cultural barriers. David and Jennifer watched in amazement. What had started out as their special day had turned into something much bigger. It was a moment of togetherness, of mutual understanding, of celebrating the differences that made them unique and the similarities that united them. You know, David said softly to Jennifer, when we planned this wedding, we hoped it would be a day of love and joy. But this is beyond our wildest dreams. Jennifer nodded, her eyes shining with emotion. It's like we planted a seed today, a seed of love, acceptance, and understanding. And look how it's already blossoming, Maya added, gesturing to the diverse group around them. As the evening deepened, the conversations continued, punctuated by laughter and the occasional tear of emotion. Stories were shared, friendships were formed, and barriers were broken down. At the center of it all, David and Jennifer stood hand in hand, their hearts full of love not only for each other, but for every single person who had contributed to making this day so extraordinary. It was more than a wedding. It was the start of something bigger, something that had the potential to echo far beyond that garden, far beyond that day. It was the start of a journey of love, understanding, and togetherness that promised to transform not only their lives, but the lives of everyone around them. The next morning, the sun rose over a transformed Boston, at least in David and Jennifer's eyes. As they ate breakfast in their hotel room, the newlyweds reflected on the events of the previous day, their minds still spinning with emotions and revelations. "Did you see Raj's post?" Jennifer asked, handing David her phone. On the screen, there was a photo of the diverse group of guests dancing together, accompanied by an emotional caption. "Yesterday, I witnessed the power of love to unite cultures, break down barriers, and create a better world. Thank you, David and Jennifer, for showing us the way." David smiled, feeling a surge of emotion. "It seems that our marriage has had a greater impact than we imagined." Just then, Jennifer's phone rang. It was Maya. "Jen, you won't believe it." Maya's voice was full of enthusiasm. "The story of your wedding is spreading. A local newspaper wants to do a story on how you turned a moment of conflict into a celebration of diversity." Jennifer exchanged a surprised glance with David. "Wow, that's unexpected." "That's not all," Maya continued. "Some civil rights organizations got in touch. They want you to speak at an event about inclusion and acceptance." After hanging up, David and Jennifer were silent for a moment, processing the information. "Looks like we planted more than just a seed yesterday." David reflected. Jennifer nodded, her eyes shining with a mixture of emotion and determination. "Maybe this is an opportunity, a chance to continue what we started yesterday." In the weeks that followed, David and Jennifer found themselves at the center of an unexpected wave of attention and support. The story of their marriage spread, first locally, then nationally. They were invited onto talk shows, where they shared their experience and the message of love and acceptance that had emerged from their big day. Jennifer, in particular, shone in these appearances, her eloquence and passion captivating the audience. "It's not just about tolerance," she said in one particularly striking interview. "It's about celebrating our differences, about understanding that diversity makes us stronger, not weaker." David, for his part, used his legal training to tackle more systemic issues. He began working with civil rights organizations, offering his expertise to help bring about legislative changes that would promote equality and inclusion. But perhaps the most surprising change came from an unexpected source: Uncle Richard. About a month after the wedding, Richard asked to meet David and Jennifer. They met in a quiet cafe in downtown Boston, the nervousness palpable in the air. I wanted to apologize again," Richard began, his voice trembling. "What I did at your wedding, well, it was unforgivable. But what happened afterwards made me rethink a lot of things. He paused, taking a deep breath before continuing. I started attending a support group for people who want to overcome their prejudices. Well, I was wondering if you'd be willing to help me learn more, to be better. Jennifer reached across the table for Richard's hand, her eyes shining with compassion. Of course, Uncle Richard. We're here for you. David nodded, feeling a mixture of pride and hope. The fact that you want to change is already a big step. As the months passed, the impact of David and Jennifer's marriage continued to expand in ever wider circles. They became unofficial spokespeople for the cause of diversity and inclusion, using their story to inspire others. Raj, inspired by the events of the wedding, started a cultural exchange program in his company. Maya began work on a documentary about intercultural couples, with David and Jennifer as her first interviewees. Even Fairview Manor, the wedding venue, saw changes. Inspired by David and Jennifer's ceremony, the owners began offering wedding packages specifically designed to celebrate cultural diversity. On a quiet afternoon about 6 months after their wedding, David and Jennifer walked hand in hand through Boston Common. Autumn painted the trees in shades of red and gold, a perfect backdrop for reflection. Did you ever imagine that our wedding would have such an impact? David asked, gently squeezing Jennifer's hand. Jennifer smiled, shaking her head. Never, but I'm so grateful that it did. I feel like we're really making a difference. We are. David agreed. But do you know what's most incredible? It all started with love. Our love for each other and our love for humanity. Jennifer stopped, pulling David close. And that love only continues to grow, she said softly, placing his hand on her slightly rounded belly. David's eyes widened in understanding and joy. Are you? Jennifer nodded, her eyes shining with tears of happiness. Yes, our next big adventure is on its way. As they embraced, surrounded by the vibrant colors of autumn, David and Jennifer knew that this was just another stage in their journey. A journey that had begun with a simple yes and was now transforming lives, breaking down barriers and creating a more welcoming and inclusive world. The love they shared was not just theirs. It was a beacon of hope, a catalyst for change, a promise of a better future. And now, with a new life growing up, that love was about to expand even further, bringing with it the promise of a world where diversity is celebrated and love truly conquers all. Winter in Boston had arrived in full force, covering the city in a white blanket of snow. Inside David and Jennifer's cozy apartment, the warmth of love and expectation contrasted with the cold outside. Jennifer, now 6 months pregnant, was sitting on the sofa, leafing through an album of wedding photos, while David prepared hot chocolate in the kitchen. "Hey, love," called Jennifer. "Do you remember this moment?" David approached, 2 steaming mugs in his hands, and looked at the photo Jennifer was pointing to. It was a picture of them dancing with Doña Carmen and her husband, all laughing happily. How could I forget? David smiled, handing Jennifer a mug and sitting down next to her. That's when Doña Carmen decided we needed to learn to dance for real. Jennifer laughed, stroking her protruding belly. I can't wait to tell all these stories to our little one. Just then, the doorbell rang. David got up to answer it, returning moments later with Maya, who was carrying a pile of papers and a laptop. Sorry to barge in like this, Maya said, taking off her snow-covered coat, but I needed to show you this right away. She opened her laptop and showed the couple an email. It was from a major publishing house, expressing interest in publishing a book based on David and Jennifer's story. They want you to write about your journey, Maya explained, barely containing her excitement. From the wedding until now, including all the changes you've inspired. David and Jennifer exchanged surprised glances. Wow, Jennifer murmured. That's big. It's an incredible opportunity. David agreed, taking Jennifer's hand. Think of how many people we could reach, how many minds we could open. Jennifer nodded slowly, a smile forming on her lips. And what a legacy for our son, showing him from an early age the power of love and acceptance. Maya watched the couple with a fond smile. You two continue to amaze me. Who knew that day in the garden would be just the start of something so big? In the weeks that followed, David and Jennifer immersed themselves in the book project. Between antenatal appointments and preparations for the baby, they spent hours reminiscing about their journey, discussing the crucial moments and the lessons learned. One day, while working on the chapter about the impact of their marriage, they received an unexpected call. It was Richard, David's uncle. I wanted to share something with you, Richard said, his voice laced with emotion. Remember that support group I started? Well, now I'm leading it. We're helping other people overcome their prejudices, just like you helped me. David felt a lump in his throat. Uncle Richard, this is incredible. I'm so proud of you. It's all thanks to you, Richard replied. You've shown me that it's never too late to change, to be better. After they hung up, Jennifer hugged David, tears of joy in her eyes. See, that's what it's all about. Real change, one person at a time. As spring approached, bringing with it promises of renewal, David and Jennifer's book took shape. They decided to call it Love Without Borders, a journey of acceptance and transformation. The book launch coincided with the one-year anniversary of their wedding. The local bookstore was packed, with a line stretching down the sidewalk. People of all ages and backgrounds were eagerly waiting to meet the couple who had inspired so many. Jennifer, with her 2-month-old baby in her arms, and David greeted each person with warm smiles and words of encouragement. Many shared their own stories of overcoming and acceptance, inspired by David and Jennifer's journey. Among the crowd, familiar faces stood out. Maya, of course, was there, proud and emotional. Raj had brought a group of co-workers, all eager to meet the couple who had inspired so many changes in his company. Mrs. Carmen and her husband were there, their wrinkled faces glowing with joy. And there, near the back of the queue, was Richard, clutching a copy of the book to his chest as if it were a precious treasure. When the event finally ended and the bookshop was empty, David and Jennifer found themselves alone, surrounded by piles of signed books and bouquets of flowers. We did it, love, David said softly, hugging Jennifer and their son. Look at everything we've accomplished. Jennifer smiled, looking down at the sleeping baby in her arms. And this is just the beginning. We have a lifetime ahead of us to keep spreading love and acceptance. As they walked out of the bookshop, hand in hand, with their son nestled safely between them, David and Jennifer knew that their journey was far from over. In fact, it was only the beginning of a new chapter. The sun was setting over Boston, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, reminding them of the sunset on their wedding day. And just like that day, they faced the future together, strong in their love for each other and for all of humanity, ready to continue their mission to create a more inclusive and welcoming world, one heart at a time. Summer arrived in Boston with an unusual heat wave, but inside David and Jennifer's apartment, a cool breeze of change was blowing. Their son, now 6 months old, was crawling happily across the living room carpet, while his parents were excitedly discussing their latest project. So, what do you think? Jennifer asked, her eyes shining with enthusiasm. A foundation dedicated to promoting intercultural understanding and fighting prejudice. We can use all the momentum we gain from the book to make a real difference. David smiled, picking up the baby who was crawling towards him. I think it's an amazing idea, love, and I think our little Noah agrees, don't you, champ? He lifted the baby into the air, eliciting a delighted laugh. The success of the book Love Without Borders had exceeded all expectations. Not only had it become a bestseller, but it had also started important conversations across the country about acceptance, diversity, and the transformative power of love. Now David and Jennifer felt it was time to take the next step. The idea for the foundation had emerged during one of their many talks, when a young man in the audience asked how he could make a difference in his own community. We can create educational programs. David suggested, putting Noah back on the mat. Workshops in schools, universities, even companies. Jennifer nodded enthusiastically. What about a mentoring program? We can connect people from different backgrounds, create opportunities for them to learn from each other. While they were discussing the details, Jennifer's phone rang. It was Maya. Jen, you won't believe it. Maya's voice was bursting with excitement. Remember that documentary I was making? Well, it's been selected for the Sundance Film Festival. Jennifer gave a shout of joy, startling Noah momentarily before he went back to playing with his colored blocks. Maya, this is incredible. I'm so proud of you. After hanging up, Jennifer turned to David, her eyes shining. Maya's documentary. It gave me an idea. What if we included a media component in our foundation? We could produce content that celebrates diversity, tells stories of overcoming. David smiled, pulling Jennifer into a hug. You're brilliant, you know that. That's why I fell in love with you. In the weeks that followed, David and Jennifer worked tirelessly to bring their vision to life. They recruited a diverse team of professionals passionate about the cause, including educators, psychologists, lawyers, and media specialists. The official launch of the Love Without Borders Foundation took place on a sunny August afternoon in the same garden where they had married 2 years earlier. The venue was filled with familiar faces and new allies, all united by the vision of a more inclusive world. Jennifer Muaik, with Noah in her arms, took to the stage to give the opening speech. David stood beside her, his face beaming with pride. 2 years ago, Jennifer began, her voice clear and confident. In this very place, we faced a moment of prejudice with love and understanding. Today, we are here to turn that moment into a movement. She paused, looking out at the attentive crowd. The Love Without Borders Foundation was born from the dream of a world where differences are celebrated, not feared, where love is the universal language we all speak. David then took the floor. But we can't do this alone. We need each and every one of you. Every act of kindness, every difficult conversation, every open mind, it all counts. Together, we can create the change we want to see in the world. As they spoke, faces in the crowd lit up with inspiration and determination. There was Maya, with tears in her eyes, holding a camera to document the moment. Raj was surrounded by a diverse group of colleagues, all listening intently. Mrs. Carmen and her husband were smiling proudly, as if they were seeing their own grandchildren accomplishing something extraordinary. And there, near the back, was Richard. He was no longer alone or out of place, but surrounded by members of his support group, all wearing badges identifying them as Foundation volunteers. After the speeches, while people mingled and chatted animatedly about future projects, David and Jennifer found a quiet moment. Sitting on a bench in the garden, with Noah asleep in Jennifer's arms, they watched the scene before them. Look at this, David said softly. All these people, united in a common cause. It's incredible to think that it all started with our love. Jennifer smiled, leaning against David's shoulder. It wasn't just our love, darling. It was our courage to stand up for it, to show the world that love can overcome any barrier. At that moment, with the sun setting over the horizon, painting the sky in shades of pink and orange, David and Jennifer felt a deep sense of accomplishment. They had turned their own happily ever after into something much bigger, a force for positive change in the world. And as Noah stirred gently in his sleep, they knew they were building not only a better future for their son, but for countless other children who would grow up in a more accepting and understanding world. The journey that began with a simple yes had turned into a life mission. And with each new day, each new challenge, each new victory, David and Jennifer were ready to face the future hand in hand, their hearts full of love not just for each other, but for all of humanity. The sun finally set, but for David, Jennifer, and everyone present in that garden, It was clear that a new dawn was just beginning, a dawn of hope, acceptance, and love without borders. 5 years have passed since the launch of the Love Without Borders Foundation. Autumn had arrived in Boston, painting the trees in vibrant shades of red and gold, a perfect reflection of the colorful changes David and Jennifer had brought to so many lives. It was a sunny Saturday morning, and the couple were busy preparing their apartment for a special gathering. Noah, now 5 years old and full of energy, was running around helping his parents tidy up. "Noah, darling," Jennifer called out, laughing as the boy tried to carry a pile of cushions bigger than him. "Why don't you go and get your drawings to show everyone when they arrive?" Noah nodded enthusiastically and ran off to his room, his dark curls swaying with every step. David approached Jennifer, wrapping his arms around her from behind. "Can I believe it's been 5 years?" he murmured, kissing her neck softly. Jennifer turned in his arms, smiling. "Sometimes it seems like yesterday, other times it seems like a lifetime." The sound of the doorbell interrupted the moment. Soon, the apartment was full of familiar and beloved faces. Maya was the first to arrive, carrying a framed copy of the poster for her documentary, which had won several awards and started countless important conversations about diversity and inclusion. Raj arrived next, accompanied by his new wife, a woman he had met through one of the foundation's cultural exchange programs. Richard came soon after, his face softer and gentler than it had ever been, carrying a photo album that documented his own journey of transformation. Carmen and her husband were the last to arrive, bringing a huge platter of paella that filled the apartment with delicious aromas. As everyone settled down in the living room, Noah came running back, his arms full of colorful drawings. "Look," he exclaimed, spreading the papers out on the coffee table. "I drew all of you." The adults leaned over to look, smiling tenderly. Each drawing depicted a member of their extended family, not just David, Jennifer, and Noah, but also Maya, Raj, Richard, Doña Carmen, and her husband. It was a touching representation of the family they had built, united not by blood, but by love and acceptance. "This is beautiful, Noah," Jennifer said, pulling her son into a hug. "You've captured our family perfectly." David snorted, drawing everyone's attention. "Well, since we're all here, Jennifer and I have an announcement to make." He paused dramatically, his eyes shining with emotion. "The Love Without Borders Foundation has been selected to receive this year's Nobel Peace Prize." The room erupted in shouts of joy and applause. Maya jumped up from her seat to hug Jennifer, while Raj patted David on the back. Richard had tears in his eyes, and Doña Carmen murmured blessings in Spanish. "This isn't just a victory for us," Jennifer said as the commotion subsided. "It's a victory for everyone who believes in the power of love and acceptance. It's a recognition that we can make a difference, one heart at a time." David nodded, taking Jennifer's hand. "In the last 5 years, we've seen incredible changes. Schools adopting our intercultural education programs, companies implementing diversity and inclusion policies, communities coming together to celebrate their differences instead of fearing them. And it all started here," Maya added, smiling, "with a wedding that turned into a movement." As the conversation flowed, full of memories and plans for the future, Jennifer found herself reflecting on the journey that had brought them here. From that tense moment in their marriage to now, an international award, it was almost surreal. "What are you thinking about?" David asked softly, noticing her distant gaze. Jennifer smiled, squeezing his hand. "I'm thinking about how love can change the world, how a simple yes can unleash a wave of positive change." Noah, who was listening, looked at his parents with wide eyes. "You've changed the world?" he asked, impressed. David laughed, pulling his son onto his lap. "We helped make it a little better, champ. And one day, you'll do your bit too." As the afternoon progressed, the apartment was filled with laughter, stories, and the warm feeling of family. It was a living testimony to the power of love to unite people, transcend differences, and create something truly beautiful. Later, after everyone had left and Noah was in bed, David and Jennifer stood on the balcony, watching the city lights. The Nobel Prize was an incredible honor, but looking at the city below, at the countless lives they had touched, they knew that the real prize was the love they had spread, the minds they had opened, the hearts they had transformed. "You know," Jennifer said softly, leaning back against David, "and when we got married, we thought we were just beginning our story. Little did we know that we were starting a whole new chapter for so many other people." David kissed the top of her head, smiling. "And there are many more chapters to come, love. Many more stories to tell, many more lives to touch." As they embraced under the starry Boston sky, David and Jennifer knew that their legacy would not be measured in awards or recognition, but in the love they had spread around the world, a love that transcended borders, that united cultures, that transformed lives. And so their love story continued, not just as a personal fairy tale, but as a powerful force for change in the world. A reminder to all that, in the end, love really does conquer all. If you could change just one thing in your community to promote more acceptance and understanding between different cultures, what would it be and why? Thank you so much for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and comment your thoughts. Your participation is very important to us. See you next time.